let's move into Layerson's a guy who was racking up some awards in the Big Sky Awards. Let's just talk, I would say, your regular season awards. We can kind of roll through them one at a time, or if anybody wants to just go for them all at once. We'll start with you, Fritz, just kind of Big Sky MVP. We have offense and defense, coach of the year. I want to get your guys' game of the year. We'll kind of roll through it. What do you think? We just do one at a time and go through it all, or?
Sure. The Griz did pretty good. They have House Coach of the Year for the fourth time. Third guy, he's the third coach in Big Sky Conference history to do that. Clifton McDowell's Newcomer of the Year. Eli Gilman's Freshman of the Year. And then the one I really liked was Alex Gubner being Defensive Player of the Year. I'd like to see those D tackles, nose tackles get their props. I think it happens more in the Big Sky where they get selected as Player of the Year than it does in other leagues. He did not make the Buck Buchanan Award list of finalists, which got pared down to 22 recently, but he gets his props. He is a force, and I think every coach in this league knows it. And I think if they get out and host a couple more teams from outside the conference, a lot more people know it. He's a player. Mm-hmm. Number 99 is for the Griz. And as far as snubs, I thought Winston Reed could have been defensive MVP. He's a great safety for Weaver. Riley, our linebacker for the Griz, Riley
Wilson.
Blanking. Yeah. I thought he should have been first team. I thought Rylan Ort from the Bobcats should have been first team. He was a great player all season, and I think he might have just been honorable mention. So that's all I have to say about that. Mainly happy for Governor.
Yeah, no, there was so much talent across the conference right now. It's hard to argue. And I know what you said about interior linemen. You don't see them usually get the praise, but he's definitely one of the anchors of a top-tier defense, so you understand the award. How about you, Mark? Any other choices you would have had or anything jump out at you?
Not really. Maybe, Big Sky Coach of the Year. Usually the Coach of the Year is somebody for a team that isn't very good that kind of surprises. And so in House, in his situation, after a couple of weeks, we were wondering about Montana. Were they any good? Yeah. And then they end up winning the conference. So I guess, that he's certainly deserving of it from that respect. And then the only other thing I would say, you mentioned Game of the Year, and I was thinking it wasn't a classic, but it was a pretty good game. Turns out that Montana-Idaho game in the Kibbe Dome, Montana held on and won, and they ended up winning the conference. If Idaho had won the game and the playoff the rest of the way, they'd have won the conference. So that was my Game of the Year.
Yeah, that was my Game of the Year as well. I remember watching the broadcast, ESPN2 nationally televised game, Big Sky After Dark, and the announcer, Jorge Sedano, he said this is an instant classic, and that just stuck with me because it really was one of those games. If you're a Vandal or a Griz fan, Big Sky football fan, you won't forget about that one. Just an absolutely crazy game. McCoy was making some Patrick Mahomes-esque plays late to Hatton. Just an absolute firefight for sure. Griz did hang on, and like you said, kind of changed their whole season, helped them win that title. How about you, Ian? Just thoughts on the end of the season awards, or if you have any thing different than how the results came out and maybe your Game of the Year?
Yeah, I jotted down a list, and I was pretty much in agreement with the conference in terms of how it all came out. Only difference I had, and kind of an under-the-radar guy on defensive MVP, I'd written down Jack Kelly as one of my guys, a linebacker for Weber. He ended up getting that first-team nod. 34 tackles, 12 for loss, 9.5 sacks as a linebacker, 5 pass breakups, and 4 forced fumbles, which led the Big Sky. I think he's only like a redshirt sophomore. So he'll be a force to be reckoned with in the next coming years. But that's the only difference I really had. My Game of the Year is also going to be Idaho and Montana. That was just one heck of a game. A little bit sleeper under the radar game is that Eastern and Idaho State game when Idaho State ended up mounting that 27-point comeback in 15 or 16 minutes of game time left. Obviously not like the nationally televised capturing everyone's eyes games, but that was a crazy game to watch. One that really stuck out to me this year.
Yeah, that was my honorable mention right there. And plus for Idaho State, you look back on the season, that's a big win when you look back for that program who's been up and down. You can at least have a couple big things to build on, and you look back and a comeback win like that, you don't forget about it. So, yeah, no, Big Sky Defensive Player of the Year, Governor, well-deserving. I was a little surprised Winston Reed didn't win it. He had 30 more tackles than anybody else in the conference, racked up some huge numbers, and Griz out of Montana State, he was up there too. 8.5 sacks, 43 total tackles, 12 tackles for loss. You watch Montana State play, you hear his name all game long, whether he's making a tackle or not, always creating havoc around the quarterback. So, like I mentioned with these end-of-the-year awards, Coach of the Year kind of felt like a lock after Montana turned it around. The rest of the conference, it was up in the air. Offensive MVP, we didn't even mention Hayden Hatton or McCoy or some of these guys. So there's so many different ways it could have gone. Lane Larson, well-deserving, though, an absolute monster end of the year. So that was a fun one for sure. I will give a shout-out to Cody Hawkins. He might be my newcomer of the year just for changing that program around a little bit. Speaking of Montana State, we mentioned Griz. They lost for a while, 37-7. That's a tough loss, of course. They're 8-3 on the year. All three of their losses are to top 10 teams on the road. They lost to number 1 South Dakota State, number 3 Montana, and number 9 Idaho at the Kibbe Dome. Tough place to play. I say all that because I do want to ask you,